What if I told you there's a plant that once flavored every American's childhood? It grew wild across half the continent. Native Americans revered it for thousands of years. Colonial settlers called it worth its weight in gold. By 1900, every grandmother in America knew how to brew it into a spring tonic. Then, in 1960, the FDA made it illegal. Not because it was dangerous, but because the same aromatic oil that gave root beer its flavor would eventually threaten a billion-dollar drug enforcement system. This is sassafras, the tree that saved colonists from starvation, the tree that became America's second-largest export after tobacco, the tree that disappeared from every kitchen in a single generation. But the tree never stopped growing. It just waited for someone to remember why it mattered. The story opens in the forests of eastern North America, sometime around 8000 BCE. Long before Europeans arrived, sassafras grew from Maine to Florida, from the Atlantic coast to eastern Texas. Indigenous peoples across dozens of tribes knew it by different names. The Choctaw and Cherokee knew it. The Timucua in Florida called it pavon. They didn't just use it, they revered it. The name sassafras likely comes from Spanish adaptations of Native American terms. The Nipmuc peoples called it sasakpamuk. In Latin, it was saxifragus, stonebreaker, because healers used it to treat kidney stones. Every part of the tree held medicine. The roots were brewed into tea for fevers, colds, and blood purification. The leaves were crushed into poultices for wounds, sprains, and insect bites. The bark was chewed for dental health, its natural oils killing bacteria and freshening breath long before the invention of toothpaste. The Choctaw discovered something else. If you dried the leaves and ground them into powder, they became the perfect thickener for soups and stews. They called it filé. This one ingredient would later define Louisiana Creole gumbo, a dish that literally exists because of indigenous sassafras knowledge. But sassafras wasn't just medicine or spice, it was survival food. When the English arrived at Roanoke in 1585, they reported one brutal truth. During periods of starvation, settlers survived by boiling sassafras leaves. The mucilage in the leaves provided calories when nothing else would grow. By the 1660s, Spanish explorers in Florida had learned from the Timucua that sassafras could treat dozens of ailments. French visitors documented it. English settlers tested it. And then they discovered something that changed everything. Europeans would pay anything for it. When the first sassafras shipments reached Europe in the late 1500s, they arrived at the perfect moment. A syphilis epidemic was sweeping the continent. Doctors had no cure. Patients were desperate. And here came reports from the New World of a tree whose roots could purify blood and cure disease. The aromatic smell alone was intoxicating. Legend says Christopher Columbus knew he had reached North America simply because he could smell sassafras on the wind from his ship. By 1602, demand was so intense that a single shipment of sassafras bark weighed an entire ton. In England and continental Europe, apothecaries sold it as a dark medicinal beverage called saloop. It was prescribed for everything: fevers, digestive issues, skin diseases, rheumatic pain. And it worked. Not because it cured syphilis, it didn't. Instead, sassafras tea actually does have anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial, and digestive benefits that indigenous peoples had known for millennia. The price skyrocketed. Sassafras bark sold for its weight in gold. Captain Martin Pring sailed from Bristol, England in 1603 with one mission: to find sassafras. His expedition journals describe goodly groves of the tree along the coasts of Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. He filled his ship and returned to England a wealthy man. For the next 50 years, sassafras was colonial America's second-largest export after tobacco. But there was a problem. The bark was the most valuable part. It contained the highest concentration of safrole oil. Harvesting the bark killed the tree. By 1626, just 24 years after that first ton-sized shipment, English colonists could not meet their export quota.
They had stripped every accessible sassafras tree nearly to extinction. But sassafras, like so many indigenous plants, does not surrender easily. The roots sent up new shoots. Seeds stayed buried in the soil, waiting. By the 1840s, American entrepreneurs had discovered something brilliant. You could turn sassafras into a sweet, fizzy drink that tasted like childhood itself. Root beer was born. By the turn of the 20th century, sassafras had woven itself into the fabric of American culture. Every corner store sold root beer. Every grandmother knew how to brew sassafras tea as a spring tonic. Every Southern cook kept filé powder in the pantry for gumbo. George Washington drank it. Benjamin Franklin praised it. Jefferson Davis served it at Monticello. Philadelphia pharmacist Charles Hyers turned it into a commercial empire. Hyers root beer became a household name, marketed as a healthy alternative to alcohol. The smell, the taste, the tradition, it was as American as apple pie.
The FDA made an announcement. Sassafrole, the compound that gave sassafras its distinctive flavor, caused liver cancer in laboratory rats. The evidence looked damning. Rats given oral doses of sassafras tea developed tumors, permanent liver damage, various types of cancer. Within months, sassafrole was banned from all commercially mass-produced foods and drugs. The Code of Federal Regulations, Title 21, Section 189.180, declared it a poisonous or deleterious substance. Root beer manufacturers scrambled. They switched to artificial sassafras flavoring made from petroleum derivatives. Some used wintergreen. A few used sassafras-free sassafras extract, laboriously processed to remove every trace of the dangerous compound. The $500 million root beer industry survived, but traditional sassafras use died overnight. Your grandmother stopped brewing sassafras tea. Filé powder vanished from shelves or was reformulated. Herbalists stopped recommending it. Within a generation, most Americans forgot sassafras even existed. Here's what the Food and Drug Administration did not advertise. The rats in those studies were given doses equivalent to drinking 32 bottles of root beer every single day for months, amounts no human would ever consume, even if they lived on sassafras tea. And here's what they really didn't tell you. Nutmeg contains sassafrole. Black pepper contains sassafrole. Cinnamon, star anise, and basil all contain sassafrole. In fact, nutmeg contains 4 times more sassafrole than sassafras. None of those were banned. You can buy them at any grocery store right now. Why? By the 1970s, something else had emerged, something the FDA had not said out loud in 1960. Sassafrole is not just an aromatic oil, it's a chemical precursor. Underground chemists in the 1960s and 70s figured out that sassafrole could be converted into MDA and MDMA, the drugs known as ecstasy and Molly. The synthesis was not particularly complex. Extract sassafrole oil from sassafras trees, run it through a few chemical steps, and suddenly you have a Schedule I controlled substance. By the time the war on drugs ramped up in the 1970s, the DEA had a problem. Sassafras trees grew wild across the entire eastern United States. Anyone with basic chemistry knowledge could harvest the roots, extract the oil, and start cooking MDMA. The DEA couldn't ban the tree. It's native, it's everywhere, and attempting to eradicate it would be impossible. But they could make sassafrole a List 1 chemical, the DEA designation for substances used in manufacturing a controlled substance or important to the manufacture of a controlled substance. List 1 is the hot-as-hell category. Pseudoephedrine is on this list, so is sassafrole. Today, it is unlawful to knowingly or intentionally possess or distribute sassafrole, knowing or having reasonable cause to believe the sassafrole will be used to manufacture MDMA. In 2015, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police raided a clandestine lab and seized 1,500 kilograms of sassafras oil. News reports said it could be converted into 4.2 million MDMA tablets. Think about what this means. A tree that Native Americans used safely for 10,000 years became classified as a drug precursor, not because it's dangerous in traditional use, but because it could be weaponized by people with chemistry equipment. The 1960 FDA ban wasn't really about cancer. It was about control.
about making sure an easily accessible natural compound couldn't fuel illegal drug manufacturing. Mission accomplished. One plant gets erased from American foodways, while nutmeg and basil get a pass. The difference: you cannot efficiently convert grocery store nutmeg into MDMA tablets. You can convert sassafras oil. Not because of danger, because of control. But let's talk about what we actually lost. Sassafras root tea was traditionally used as a blood purifier, a spring tonic to thin the blood after winter. Modern analysis shows it contains compounds with genuine anti-inflammatory properties. That's not folklore, it's chemistry. The leaves contain mucilage, the same soothing substance found in slippery elm and marshmallow root. This explains why Native Americans used it for digestive issues and why chewing sassafras bark soothed sore throats. Filé powder is not just a thickener. Dried sassafras leaves contain vitamin A, vitamin C, calcium, and manganese. When West African enslaved people in Louisiana melded their culinary traditions with Native American and European influences, filé became central to Creole gumbo, a dish that literally would not exist without sassafras. The aromatic compounds have antimicrobial properties. That's why sassafras twigs were used as toothbrushes for centuries, natural dental care before petroleum-based toothpaste. And here's the part nobody talks about. Recent studies show that sassafrole in small amounts may have protective effects against certain cancers, not cause them, protect against them. You won't find those studies promoted by regulatory agencies. Research requires approval. Approval requires removing the drug precursor stigma, and removing that stigma threatens enforcement budgets worth billions. So, the tree waits. Today, sassafras trees still grow wild across 20 states. You can walk through any deciduous forest from Maine to Texas and find them. In fall, their leaves turn brilliant colors: yellow, burgundy, orange. They're instantly recognizable by their three distinct leaf shapes: oval, mitten-shaped, and three-lobed. The trees don't care about FDA regulations. They don't care about DEA classifications. They just keep growing. If you want sassafras today, you have limited options. It's not illegal to possess the tree or harvest it for personal use. The restrictions apply to commercial sale, import, and distribution of sassafrole-containing products. Some people still make sassafras tea from foraged roots. They know to use it sparingly, traditionally, not in the massive doses that harmed laboratory rats. You can buy sassafrole-free sassafras extract online, processed, stripped, diluted. It's not the same. The compound that made sassafras valuable for millennia has been removed to comply with regulations. Meanwhile, nutmeg sits on your spice rack right now, containing 4 times the sassafrole of sassafras. Black pepper, cinnamon, and basil are all perfectly legal. The story of sassafras is part of a larger pattern. When a plant has been used safely for thousands of years but threatens either a profitable industry or government control mechanisms, it gets targeted. The justification changes. Sometimes it's labeled unsafe, sometimes a drug precursor. But the result is always the same. Traditional knowledge disappears. Natural alternatives vanish. People forget. Your great-grandmother knew how to make sassafras tea. Your grandmother might remember the taste of real root beer. You probably don't even know what the tree looks like. One generation, that's all it takes to erase 10,000 years of indigenous wisdom. The irony is that sassafras could have a role in modern medicine. Its anti-inflammatory compounds, its antimicrobial properties, its traditional use as a digestive aid. All of this deserves research, but research requires regulatory approval. Approval requires removing the drug precursor stigma, and removing that stigma threatens enforcement budgets worth billions. So, the tree waits. Today, sassafras trees still grow wild across 20 states. You can walk through any deciduous forest from Maine to Texas and find them. In fall, their leaves turn brilliant colors: yellow, burgundy, orange. They're instantly recognizable by their 3 distinct leaf shapes: oval, mitten-shaped, and three-lobed. The trees don't care about FDA regulations. They don't care about DEA classifications. They just keep growing. If you want sassafras today, you have limited options. It's not illegal to possess the tree or harvest it for personal use. The restrictions apply to commercial sale, import, and distribution of sassafrole-containing products. Some people still make sassafras tea from foraged roots. They know to use it sparingly, traditionally, not in the massive doses that harmed laboratory rats. You can buy sassafrole-free sassafras extract online. Processed, stripped, diluted. It's not the same. The compound that made sassafras valuable for millennia has been removed to comply with regulations. Meanwhile, nutmeg sits on your spice rack right now, containing 4 times the sassafrole of sassafras. Black pepper, cinnamon, and basil are all perfectly legal. The story of sassafras is part of a larger pattern. When a plant has been used safely for thousands of years, but threatens either a profitable industry or government control mechanisms, it gets targeted. The justification changes. Sometimes it's labeled unsafe, sometimes a drug precursor. But the result is always the same. Traditional knowledge disappears. Natural alternatives vanish. People forget. Your great-grandmother knew how to make sassafras tea. Your grandmother might remember the taste of real root beer. You probably don't even know what the tree looks like. 1 generation, that's all it takes to erase 10,000 years of indigenous wisdom. The irony is that sassafras could have a role in modern medicine. Its anti-inflammatory compounds, its antimicrobial properties, its traditional use as a digestive aid. All of this deserves research, but research requires regulatory approval. Approval requires removing the drug precursor stigma, and removing that stigma threatens enforcement budgets worth billions. So, the tree waits. Today, sassafras trees still grow wild across 20 states. You can walk through any deciduous forest from Maine to Texas and find them. In fall, their leaves turn brilliant colors: yellow, burgundy, orange. They're instantly recognizable by their 3 distinct leaf shapes: oval, mitten-shaped, and 3-lobed. The trees don't care about FDA regulations. They don't care about DEA classifications. They just keep growing. If you want sassafras today, you have limited options. It's not illegal to possess the tree or harvest it for personal use. The restrictions apply to...
The story of sassafras is not about a plant. It's about who controls knowledge. For 10,000 years, indigenous peoples knew how to use sassafras safely. For 400 years, it was woven into American culture. Then, in 2 decades, from 1960 to 1980, it vanished. Not because the science said it was dangerous in traditional amounts, but because bureaucracy, drug enforcement, and corporate interests aligned to make it disappear. The tree is still here, the knowledge is still recoverable, but every year that passes, fewer people remember. Elders who grew up drinking sassafras tea are dying. Recipes are being lost. Children are growing up thinking root beer comes from a laboratory, not from roots in the ground. This is not just about sassafras, it's about a pattern. When plants offer alternatives to pharmaceuticals, they get scrutinized. When they can't be patented, they get ignored. When they threaten control systems, they get banned. Sassafras threatened both: a natural compound anyone could access, a flavor no corporation could own, a tradition that didn't require permission, so it had to go. But here's what they couldn't erase: the trees, the roots, the seeds sleeping in the soil. Sassafras is waiting, not for permission, for recognition. All it asks is that we look past the regulations and see what was always there: a tree that Native Americans trusted for 10,000 years, that colonists depended on, that flavored America's childhood. It never stopped offering its gifts. We just stopped paying attention. The tree that grew wild across half the continent is still growing. The flavor that defined childhood is still there in the roots. The medicine that sustained indigenous peoples for millennia is still potent. Sassafras didn't disappear. We were taught to look away. But the trees remember. And now, so do you.